You guys are kicking it.
Two
Thanks for
different
kicking it. If you're
haunts.
lurking and listening
One
along,
annoyed
thanks for
advocate.
joining me.
From Anonymous. Since I was a little kid, my mom has been working at a domestic violence program. So while growing up, I helped out in the different shelters, cleaning the playroom, aka making a bigger mess than when I found it. There are two shelters I particularly remember growing up around. A huge, beautiful old building that was built back in the 1890s, and an old school/nunnery that has since been repurposed into our shelter. Even when I was younger, I heard whispers of ghost stories and strange encounters that the staff and clients would tell. I even remember playing with a little boy who talked about seeing a tall black shadow which walked down the hall and into one of the rooms in the nunnery. So that's where I began the tale of the old nunnery.
Hey, buddy.
When I grew up, I swore up and down that I would not get into the domestic violence field. I even went to college to be a microbiologist. But life has a different plan sometimes. After several sharp turns, I ended up getting a social work degree, and I worked at the shelters. I was an overnight advocate for about 4 years, which is when these stories started and my own experiences came to light. During the first few months that I started working there, I had a client come down. They were visibly shaken, and I asked what happened. Thinking at this point I might have to call 911 if an abuser showed up, I quickly glanced at the cameras and saw that there was nothing outside but a cold winter night. The client cleared their throat and spoke, and what came next chilled me to my bones. I think I saw something, but I'm not sure what to do. The client spoke in a shaky voice. I patted the seat next to the office desk I was working at. She sat down while I asked, "What do you mean you saw something? Do you mean like a bug or someone outside?" They sat in quiet for what seemed like hours, their face scrunched up like they were trying to put what they saw into words, but could not come up with the right combination. Finally, they said something. I thought I saw someone walk into my kid's room, but when I went into the room to confront them, there was no one there." "What do you mean? Someone went into their room?" I racked my brain on who all might be in the shelter at this time, but at the time all the other clients had night jobs, so it was just me and their family in the shelter. "It was someone tall in a black robe. I had just come out of the kitchen and I saw them walking. Well, I guess not really walking, but gliding down the hall. I saw the door open and close. I know I must sound crazy, but I swear to you, I saw a white hand reach out and open the door, then close the door behind them." "Okay, grab your kids and go back into your room. The alarm is on, and the only way in and out of this shelter is through the door by our office. So if anyone is here, we will see them or they'll trip the alarm." I grabbed the hotline and dialed 911 so that the police could come clear the house. Once the officers left, though, investigating the property, they stated that there were no signs of a break-in. I even rewound our surveillance footage, and I found nothing, minus the clients coming and leaving from shelter and a stray dog which had wandered through our front yard. With a sigh of relief, I settled in for the rest of my shift. The next couple of months were quiet. New clients came and went, so there was a new crop of people in the program. During this time, I talked to my fellow coworkers. They told me about how they heard things move around upstairs while no one was in the shelter, but nothing like what the client had talked about. So I did what any good Catholic was taught. Ignore the crap out of the spirits until they go away. However, although I did ignore them, they did not ignore me. After the start of the new year, my coworker and I were doing shift change. At our shelter, evenings and overnights, only one person works at a time. How our office is set up is that there is the advocate's office which connects to a conference room, which then leads to the laundry area, where there is a door to exit the shelter. We were talking about client matters and didn't feel like getting up and shutting the conference room door. So we had the advocate's door cracked open to see if anyone was coming. While we were both deeply involved in the conversation, the advocate's door slammed shut. For those out there that might say, well, maybe some vibrations closed the door, here's why that's not possible here. The offices are in the basement of the shelter, and no matter how much you jump up and down or dance, that door doesn't move. Trust me, I tried after this instance. We tried our best to recreate what happened, but we could never make it work. As I've worked in the program throughout the years, other creepy things would happen, like someone grabbing my chair, an invisible force sitting at the edge of the advocate bed. It was a part-time sleeping position, and the smell of rotten eggs around room 3, where the client saw the ghost walk in. I started referring to the ghost as Sister Margaret. I ran into one of my old teachers who used to work at the school, which the nunnery was involved with, and asked her if she heard about anyone dying in the nunnery. She asked more about our experiences, and after much discussion, I was originally thinking she was going to laugh at the stories, since she was always a scientific thinker and always had to have proof before she believed anything. However, after I finished relaying pretty much exactly what I just told you all, her face had a serious look to it. She talked about how no nun had died on the property, and what we were experiencing wasn't a ghost. You have to make a copper omega symbol, blessed with holy oil, and place it facing north in the room. That will close the portal that must be in the shelter. A portal, huh? So that's exactly what I did. And ever since then, no client has talked about seeing ghosts. At least, not in that specific shelter. At our sister location, the house built back in the 1890s, there isn't an evil ghost, just someone who isn't ready to let go of their home yet. I'd picked up a shift at that location to help during the summer lull. Most of the advocates who worked there were college students at the nearby college and would go home for the summer. This is also a part-time sleeping position, which means once you lock up at midnight, you could sleep until 6 a.m., unless the hotline rang, which meant you have to get up and answer it. The sister location's office was located in what we called the day room. It was on the main level of the building and towards the front of the house. There were two main entrances to the room, which were two 8-foot-tall sliding original doors. One of the doors leads into the children's playroom, which is by the kitchen. The other leads to the foyer. So, to lock up, the advocates would padlock themselves in the room so no one could walk in while they were sleeping. As I was laying on the couch, listening to another episode of Bob's Burgers with my eyes closed, I heard the faint sounds of footsteps from the upstairs level, where the clients slept. Someone was making their way downstairs. It was soft and faint, like the sounds of a child's footsteps when they didn't want to get caught. I thought, it's probably just a kid getting a glass of water. However, instead of going towards the kitchen, these footsteps turned and walked into the playroom. They stopped outside the doors to the advocate's office. I lay there, wondering if they heard the show and thought I was on a hotline, and suddenly thought they were being too noisy, which happens. Wake up, wake up, wake up. I heard an old man's voice in my ear. I shot straight up with goosebumps forming all over my arms. Then, a loud bang came from the door where the footsteps had stopped. It was like someone took both of their hands and hit the other side. With that, the shelter became quiet again. I got up and looked around the shelter. However, all the clients were in bed sleeping, and the alarm was set, which meant no one could come or leave without us knowing. The next day, I stopped the shelter lead on my way out the door, and I asked, "Hey, is this place haunted?" She looked at me and laughed. "Oh, did Walt visit you?" Dumbfounded, I asked what she meant. Apparently, Walt lived in the house back when it was first built, and just never left. He had never hurt anyone, but he did love messing around with new advocates, especially overnight staff, by walking around, moving things, knocking on doors, or waking the advocates up. That's it for my shelter stories. If you or anyone you know needs help fleeing from a DV relationship, there is help out there.